My voice is holding up well, yes? Okay, let's do this. The wonderful thing about being a Unitarian Universalist, one of the most wonderful things, is that we inherit a tradition of theological heresy and possibility. This tradition has its roots and its architecture in the early Christian church. The Unitarians, which challenged the Trinitarian belief as God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and Universalism, which proposed that everyone is reconciled with God regardless of faith or action. As Unitarian Universalists, we inherit a faith that challenges and questions orthodoxy and authority, and this is our tradition over hundreds of years, a tradition that opens towards new possibilities and is willing to be bold and brave in its theological statements. I'm personally interested in our Universalist roots that claim a divine love so enormous and so powerful that it is redemptive for all people and the world. For me, our connection to Christian Universalism is an important legacy. It reminds me that we inherit an imagination of love that does not ignore human failure and imperfection, and it does not dismiss human suffering. It reminds me that this life is worth living boldly and courageously in spite of our struggles. I notice and I experience this love as restorative, transformative, personal, and political. And this was made evident by Universalist minister Clarence Skinner when he wrote a book called, quote, "The Social Implications of Universalism" in 1915. It's a treatise addressing the sufferings and injustice of modernity of his time. The first lines of this text are breathtaking. Skinner starts the foreword of his book with this question, quote, "How to transform this old earth into the kingdom of heaven? That is the primal question. For thousands of years, sad-eyed men have looked upon this war-racked and greed-broken world, yearning to gather it in their great healing love." Whew, that hits me right in the feels. Gather it in their great healing love. Skinner, in 1915, proposes a theology that connects a God of love and justice to the human mandate to create a world of love and justice as a natural extension of that relationship. With the problem of salvation solved, human beings can focus on eliminating the sufferings of this life. We can create the kingdom of heaven on earth. This kind of love is available to us as a source and an inspiration. Yet, we don't always get gritty with history, with the implications of the tradition we inherit. Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt shared this message in a 2018 sermon she gave at the Service of the Living Tradition. And it was also shared as part of a reflection on Unitarian Universalist theology in widening the circle of concern. The 2020 report from the Commission on Institutional Change at the Unitarian Universalist Association that offered analysis and recommendations to Unitarian Universalist congregations on addressing racism and systemic injustice in our congregations and in our faith. And that report, Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt shared, "We are the theological inheritors of teachings on universal salvation, There is no winnowing out of the supposedly unworthy that can be named sacred among us. It is our very universalism that is at stake when we turn away from the impact that our institutions have on the same communities and groups that society encourages us to dehumanize and make small. We inherit this great tradition, and it excites and inspires me. It makes my heart glow as I imagine the possibilities for our Unitarian Universalist communities and the world. And it also meets me in a practical, liberating social and moral ethic of love that, without hesitation, as Black feminist bell hooks reminds us, love is a verb. And I love that Elaine brought that forward for us this morning too. Love is a verb. It requires action. It's an embodied feeling of connection and doing in the world that unfurls in healing, justice, reverence, and hope for the good of all, for the greater good, for the love of all that is good. And I'm mindful here that we have to resist romanticizing love's power, or we miss an important truth. Christian ethicist Reverend Dr. Tracy West gave a talk at the Revolutionary Love Conference at Middle Church in New York City. And in this talk, she offered a moral disruption to the tendency of faith communities to cast love as saving and connectional, while erasing the ways in which love can hide and erase violence. Dr. West reminds us that sometimes the logic of love can be dangerous and destructive. A spirit of love alone will not, by itself, readjust and redistribute power in equitable and liberating ways. Any theology of love must also be carefully paired with an ethic of love, an ethic that has accountability mapped into a love practice, a moral framework that accounts for violence and harm. And we might get curious about the ways romantic notions of love that map out a salvific love as a universalizing framework for solving our problems. We might acknowledge that how injustice demeans and dehumanizes people and the planet, and we have to focus on that love ethic. Love cannot live outside a moral compass, even as it sets a moral mandate. It too requires accountability in order to flourish. It requires a community of practice like ours to live love responsibly. Our Unitarian Universalist community, as we practice love, as we live love, as we bring love into being, attunes us to justice, equity, and freedom. As we take loving action in the world, we've got to center that love ethic. And it's really compelling, this love story. And I want to share an example with you. This past week at the 9R school board meeting, speaking about the proposals regarding pride, progressive pride, and Black Lives Matter flags in our schools, I shared our UU message, our life-saving, life-affirming message of love and justice. The school board voted unanimously to affirm the two proposals, by the way, and we should recognize and celebrate the courage of youth, families, and teachers and the community who shared their stories and leveraged their privilege to make that happen. There was a lot of vulnerability. as part of this. So anyway, after the vote, people were hugging and cheering and getting ready to go home, and one of the teachers came up to me, and they shared how grateful they were to hear a message of love, and that the message of love, makes all the difference. I then was gifted with a hug that brought me to tears, because I knew in that moment that it wasn't me, it was our faith, our Unitarian Universalist faith, and our powerful message of love, that changes everything. We can't underestimate the power of love to reach into the world in meaningful ways. It is life-saving and life-affirming. And we are in a season to love radiantly, relentlessly, and fearlessly as an antidote to isolation, loneliness, and tyranny. Love is an antidote to injustice, especially as we harness the fiery faith that stirs change, that activates resistance, that lives at the very center of our faith. We have an opportunity as we return to the warmth of community gathered around the hearth of love to be bold and awkward and courageous, following the moral compass of our shared tradition to bring the beloved community into being in this life for the flourishing of all people and the earth. May it be so, and blessed be